So we look good there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's going on? We bring you to the headquarters here, where I've brought Hialee with my very high level of production. See where we're gonna get, we don't have crazy lights around us. We don't have too many crazy microphones and stuff, but we're gonna give you some quality content and some quality conversation, at the very least, hopefully.
Yes.
But one thing you and I have been talking about recently, and it's been, and this can go on so many different levels, but it's just like all these different forms of yoga and how it's very, let me start with a story, because I told you I was following somebody who went to a different yoga workshop or had a teacher come in from, I think somewhere from Texas or something, that practices a different style of yoga. And then they made the post about it, and I see the post and I'm like, what is different? You just like, they just literally were exploring moving through the spine instead of like just this linear basic thing you usually do in yoga. So somebody comes in and teaches an advanced specialized course, and it was just like, no, start to let your hips move, start to let your spine move, start to play around. And a second, if you even take it further, like you might do, which is start to go laterally off your mat a little bit. People freak out. And it's kind of a weird thing. And so that's why you teach a different style of yoga. You teach something that you call primal yoga.
Yes.
Or primal vinyasa, because you still have a vinyasa component in there.
Yes.
But, you know, kind of explain what primal is to you and how you came up with it based on where you started yoga.
So number one, I think, if you think back to where yoga came from, right? Our bodies have evolved so much from that. And at the same time, there are a lot of traditional yoga postures that just aren't really as beneficial to us now as maybe they thought they once were, or maybe they were when whoever came up with them. And when you take it more into a primal aspect, to me, we're getting closer to the ground. We're already bearing weight on our hands a lot in yoga anyway, but we're kind of taking away some of those boundaries of traditional yoga as far as this pose needs to look like this. We need this much bend in our knee. We need this angle of the ankle. The arms are going to be here. We're kind of like strict ideas of what yoga poses were supposed to look like versus how does this pose feel and how is it benefiting me?
Man, that's something I can say, because I can move well, but I've always been a very high level of exercise and I have a lot of mileage in my body. So when I do get back into yoga, and it's something I'm not very good at and proficient at, I'm stiff, I'm not able to get into these positions as well. And there's been a lot of places that I've been to where people try to push me into the position. Like I've got to, what can I do? I've got to get to this thing instead of do something what you just said, which is feel. Like what feels good.
Yes.
We can always modify and get to different places that are still kind of accomplishing the same goal.
Yes.
So, and that goes just in line with exercise, where we're trying to we're trying to put bodies into exercises instead of like exercises and finding the right exercises onto the right bodies.
Right.
And it's a very tough thing. So another thing that is kind of interesting I take from that, where my mind goes, is like in every industry or niche of exercise, yoga, movement, strength training, they all like get back to this childlike pre-development stage of like where we really learn to move. And so everybody goes back to this infant development series, and that's kind of that primal aspect of moving. Now the interesting thing is, being a realist, if we get the majority of people we get around us, man, we cannot do these, like especially the ancient poses, and like when people lived healthier lifestyles and can move better, we do not live in that today. Like our environment is different, and if our yoga and stuff is not and our strength training is not kind of trying to combat what environment is doing, then we're getting further into that dysfunctional hole, which is a place we've both been in with back pain and injuries and things where we've screwed ourselves up, and we've had to reassess and change the balance of things and evolve over time. So as I'm long-winded thing here is this childlike infant development thing is really this primal play aspect that you're like bringing into yoga, and you're like mixing these things, almost giving, in what I would say, a body a better chance to adapt and move and play, and the nervous system to really have a better chance of being able to do things that translate to everyday life.
Yes. And to break it down in its simplest form, you know, there are so many things that we do in traditional styles of yoga that are meant for very few people. The majority of our population is not meant to practice super deep back bends and get their foot behind their head and their leg behind their head and, come into that deepest version of a forward fold. These are things that aren't really going to benefit us. There are certain people that, they're fun, and there are certain people that can do them without issue. But that group of people is very small. There are people that are just naturally flexible, and they are able to push their joints and their flexibility to a certain point without much repercussion, and they may be able to get away with that for the rest of their life. However, that doesn't include the general population. It doesn't include me. It doesn't include you. And with traditional yoga, I have pushed myself, granted, I already had, leading up to my yoga career practice, I'd been a cheerleader, I'd been a gymnast, I'd abused my body plenty as far as pushing my joints into positions and putting compression on my joints that I should not have been doing.
We're addicted to
But we get addicted
to this journey.
To that push. And when I started yoga, I became addicted to it as well. And I remember having goals of doing certain poses that I knew my body did not really feel good. But at the time, my ego was just like, yeah, but you can probably do them.
Yeah.
If you work hard enough and keep pushing your flexibility, you could get to that point,
This is a cool thing, because this is like, you said a lot of truth in there, where general population doesn't need this, I don't need this, I'm 39 years old now, okay? There's a time though, and there's an interesting time, and I'm just gonna go ahead and coin it, it's in your 20s. Let's say it's 18 through 30. When you reach 30, you better start making adult decisions with the body. But there is this time, if you really are interested in yoga or strength training, and you want to be a coach or whatever, if you have a real passion in this and you're dedicated, those are the people like ourselves who do take it too far. And there's so much growth and value in that process of, you talk about the yogis. We know a guy, a great friend of mine who I love, Bryce Delbridge, was somebody I talked to you about, and you knew him. And it's I loved watching how far he took it. And then it was crazy, because all of a sudden it's now I'm going in reverse.
Yeah.
And then everybody you talk about, crazy backbenders and stuff, we reach these levels, it does so much to you mentally on your journey, and it's an accomplishment. But then you realize, okay, this is not optimal for a long time. I've got to get back into reality. Now, if you're 30 and above, and you're general pop and stuff, and you don't have a background, and you don't have time in your youth, in your window, to go hard, you can't be doing this shit, or you're gonna fuck yourself up, really bad. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing to it is, we're in today's time where we still want to try to overreach, and we don't want to quite weigh all of our balances of things. And so that's another reason, I know we're kind of getting off from the primal yoga, but that's another reason I like the primal yoga, and I like the primal aspect of movement, because it really forces you to think.
Yes.
It really forces you to far beyond, can I keep up in this yoga sequences? Can I keep up in these order of poses? I can start to, figure that out. But when I take away the structure, and when the structure is taken away from me, and I actually have to move and auto-regulate and think on the fly and find stability in places I'm not practicing all the time.
Right.
It's a tremendous value.
And that's why I always say for me, the strength in yoga comes more from the transition and less from the destination that you're moving towards. Because the way that we build stability in our joints, I mean, take a strength training exercise, for instance, if you're squatting and moving up and down out of your squat, it's not the bottom of the squat that is giving you the most benefit. It's learning how to move in and out of that squat and in a stable, efficient way that is beneficial for your joints and is making you stronger. Because when you take that squat outside of the gym, you're going to have to figure that out on your own, and you're going to have to use those mechanics to move your body efficiently. And holding a lunge, a crescent lunge, for instance, suppose that we do almost every yoga class you will ever go to, most likely is going to have a crescent lunge. When we take this crescent lunge, our legs are split from front to back, right? So we're already putting our body in a somewhat unstable position as far as the pelvis and the low back. Now, when you take the arms overhead, that changes it even more. It puts more tension on our spine usually, and it forces our spine more into an extension position. If we don't know how to put the hips in the right place and put the front knee in the right place and the back foot in the right place, putting all of these things, adding on to that lunge, is going to put our body in a position that's not necessarily going to be beneficial to us in the long run until we break it down and feel comfortable from the feet up.
Okay, so 3 things off of this. Is a crescent lunge bad?
No.
Okay.
It can be.
All right. So that's a valuable thing to always think on that. But the other thing you were talking about there is transitions.
Yes.
That is a cool thing. Like when we didn't pre-plan this, so like when she said that, I'm thinking this is exactly where my mind has been captivated. It's from A to B, or it's the transition from right leg to left leg in a lunge or whatever it is. It's the transition that shows the compensations.
Yes.
And we can get everybody into the destination and get up and down, and everybody can do the squat, but it's what's happening in between. So if you are practicing a movement practice that is more about getting from A to B under control rather than mastering A to B,
right.
That speaks for itself. I mean, it really does, especially when we are looking at locomotion.
Yes.
And this is what you've known that I've become obsessed with recently. I'm not a runner. I used to be, but I'm not right now. And I'm not like becoming obsessed with running and gait pattern. I'm just all of a sudden I'm like becoming obsessed with trying to make everything we do translate to better forward locomotion and like better pain-free forward locomotion. Because if you hurt and walking sucks, like then life is gonna suck. This is not gonna be fun. We've got to be able to get out of these and then try to figure out the appropriate stack of all the shit I want to be able to put on it and see how that works out.
And I think that, on a basic level of vinyasa flow, which is where I started my yoga journey, and the first thing that kind of piqued my interest in yoga, and I loved it because it was so dynamic and interesting, and I wasn't bored, and it took my attention so that I could like really focus on what my body was doing and how to communicate to my body parts specifically, rather than, and it's a moving meditation in that way. It forces your mind into this space of your body rather than outside distractions.
You practiced Ashtanga too, didn't you?
I have not. I've practiced Ashtanga before. Vinyasa flow is the only style of yoga that I have practiced consistently. And things like Ashtanga and Bikram didn't interest me much because it was the same thing every time.
Right.
And I know myself, and I don't think I'm the only one, if you already know what's coming, your body is going to start to get into this repetition mode of just like doing these poses versus actually thinking about the poses and what my body is feeling like in this pose and how am I getting in and out of this pose. And the second part of that is
it's an interesting
long holds. There's certain styles of yoga where they will hold a pose for 5 breaths or so, which if you know anything about yoga breathing, it's a long breath. It's a long inhale and a long exhale. So we're talking about being stuck in this pose for a few seconds at the least.
Where's the most important place that the breath comes in? Is it the transition?
Yeah, to me, yes.
We're back in of linking. That's another thing that I always sucked at, and I always watched other people, and it makes total sense of like, I can get my breath under control when I'm holding the position.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But I've got to be able to link this.
Yes.
And that's just more than mental and physical. That's the combination of both, because it's hard to especially as guys who are trying to get in and like have the ego of I should be able to keep up. It's like, well, you should be able to keep up with your breath. So let's work on that first.
And that's a good point, because when I started teaching this style of yoga, I would always breathe in the moments that I could to start to get that timing down of like, how long should it take us to get from A to B? Yeah. Is it going to take a full inhale, full exhale? How long is that? When I first started teaching, that time would feel so awkward to me as an instructor, because I wasn't talking and I was just kind of giving them that space to like find their position, and I would just keep chatting at them instead of like letting them get into the position and figuring it out. And over time I've got that timing down pretty well, as far as like, we're going to inhale into this lunge, we're going to exhale out of the lunge, and we may hold it for a breath in between. But the most important thing being, I want you to stretch this transition of a crescent lunge to a hinged crescent lunge throughout your entire exhale. When you get to the bottom of your exhale, that's when you're in the position. Yeah. Then you inhale, you're either going to stay there or you're going to move out of it into another position. And that's real life.
Yeah, no, this is breathing education that systematically will line up in any sport, in any, this is what, we're addicted to the cold plunges because it literally forces you to start doing these things. So.
And it's the same thing with, a kettlebell swing. You would instruct someone to breathe in during a certain space, breathe out during another space.
We want to find alignment. We want to combine all these things. That's what makes exercise so holistically powerful, when we combine all those things. Mm-hmm. When we don't combine all those things, there's holes. Exercise is still very beneficial, but those holes can catch up to us at sometimes.
Yes.
This is why I love the Primal yoga, because I believe it adds just that little bit of, like when everybody talks strength training, everything's like bilateral.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden somebody's like, hey, we need to start getting the obliques. We need to start doing some side planks, get a little rotation. And that, to me, that's what Primal yoga is. Of course, you have unilateral stuff and twisting exercises, but you're still on the context of this mat. And when you start to change that and you use 360 degrees up and down every way against gravity, it's a different game.
So
it's fun.
One of the big benefits of yoga in general are certain movements that we do that you don't do in any other activity, right? Like you're saying, like side bending. Yoga, we do tons of side bending, but you don't really do that in a lot of other things. Yoga, we do a lot of heart opening and chest expansion. You don't really get that in strength training necessarily, but it is important for strength training. If somebody is working on their push-up, for instance, and they are so tight in their chest that they can't open up and expand, it's going to be hard for them to turn on their lats and stabilize their shoulders in order to efficiently perform the push-up exercise. Yeah. However, I think where we've gone wrong as a community, personally, is that, and this goes for anything, not just yoga, we take this idea that it's something great and then we just fly off the handle with it. Yeah. We take it so far to the extreme that it's no longer beneficial. Yeah. And it becomes something that our ego takes over, and we're pushing and we're pushing and we're pushing, and then we forget, like, wait, why did I start this in the first place? What was the purpose of this? What was meant? What was I meant to benefit here? Yeah. And now I've taken it off the rails, and I've turned it into something that's about ego and hitting a certain shape with my body, and that's just not, it's not beneficial to us as humans, and it kind of takes away from the aspect of yoga in general, and getting our mind connected to our body and learning how to move with intention and breathe with intention.
Yeah, well, that's why you and I are together. That's why we believe that humans should be able to get around on the ground and play and move and crawl and jump and lunge and be able to do some yoga and be able to kind of even use yoga as like meditation and their movement practice in that sense. And we need to be able to bang some weights. We need to be able to add some lean tissue and improve our ability to be stronger and more durable. And that's the cool thing about our program of what you and I do together, is that we offer strength training. We offer a middle of the ground movement style class, in which is a really cool class called Primal Flow, what you do, which is just create. Like you just create flows and whatever's, you create them all the time. And they're always changing. They're always different, but they're always very similar because we're using fundamental movements. So that's always really challenging for the brain and stuff, but then you've got your yoga. And so what makes our program so cool is it gives you, the trainee, and whoever is in our community, the ability to find your own balance, okay? So if you want to be more of a yoga person and you still want to have a little strength training, you've got that. If you want to be a hardcore strength trainer and lift some big weights, you still are going to need those other sides in there. And so we're able to provide that balance, which really makes our program complete and unique. But the best part about it is it's us. It's just like literally what we were talking about is we don't force people into exercises. We find exercises for people. And so that's the coolest part about our communities. We offer such a balance in what you can do, but we also are two of the most educated and experienced coaches around here for the long haul, and we can help you. We will navigate you. We just want to hang out, and we want you to get as consistent as you can be in hanging with us and moving with us and training with us.
And Luke and I have enough personal experience with injury, especially chronic pain, per se, that I think that's what makes me very relatable, especially in the yoga world, because I know that there are so many people, so many ex-yogis or maybe current yogis that have experienced low back pain and SI joint pain in somewhere in their yoga stint. And the truth is, nobody wants to talk about that because we don't want to ever put out the persona that yoga is bad, because it's not bad. But there are a lot of things that we can do to make it better and to make it more functional for the average human body. And putting ourselves and pushing our bodies into these deep flexibility positions is not beneficial for the average Joe. It might be okay for some people, but in general, it's not going to benefit you, and it could potentially hurt you or cause you to have pain in areas. And it's typically because our ego just keeps pushing us to find that when we shouldn't be.
It's tough. I love exercise. I love moving. I want to do everything all the time. It's not the recipe for success. But, if anybody is out there and you are hurting in any way, not saying just come visit us, come by. You can get a free week of just coming and training with us and hanging out. Even if we're not the place for you, it doesn't matter. It's just come and let's talk about what's going on in your body, because the number one thing is that if you have any discomfort and you have any non-happiness towards exercise, like it's frustrating at all, come talk. We can direct you somewhere. The biggest thing for all of us is that we're consistent and we're happy and we're moving. So if we can help you guys move a little bit better pain-free or figure some shit out, awesome. Come check us out. But, I'm glad we got to talk about this a little bit, because I know people have been wondering kind of what Primal Yoga is, who Hialee Howard is, like what it is, and it's your baby. Like there's nothing against other forms of yoga. You've practiced all these things. We enjoy all these things, and it's just a little spin on it that you like to do, what makes you feel good and what makes others feel good. And it's not for everybody, but I guarantee you, if you come try it, you're probably going to be one of the people who like it.
And I would love to know if you have fears or stigma about this particular style of movement. If you are worried about getting too far from your traditional yoga practice, that I know that's a concern for some, because a lot of us around this area have been practicing yoga for a long time in a more traditional sense, and it's really hard to get outside of that box because it's what you know, and it's what feels comfortable, and it's what makes you feel confident. And moving into something like this that's so different can be so difficult for us mentally, because we don't want to be bad at it, we don't want to have to learn something new. But the truth is, the things that we do here and the things I do in my classes are probably all things that you've done before.
Yeah.
They may present themselves in different ways, they may move different ways that may feel different or odd to you. But at the end of the day, I have created all of these flows based on like what feels good in my body and what I see from my clients' bodies, my experience with training and resistance training and yoga and primal movement. I've done different workshops with a lot of different styles of movers, and I just like to pick up things here and there and kind of decide what feels good to me and what I can comfortably pass on to my students.
Sure. That's the way. I mean, that's, in the grand scheme of things, we don't want to be confined to somebody else's method. This is our journey, and this is our experiences, and we are here to hopefully help guide others and keep ourselves out of trouble.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for listening. If you do have any of those questions, like what are your fears in trying it out? What are your fears in just like, what are your questions in general about what we do and how we might be able to help you in any way? So send them. Where can they follow you?
You can follow me at Hialee_Howard on Instagram, or the Yoga Box OKC on Instagram. You can find me pretty easily.
Yep. And you guys can find me at Green Strength IV on Instagram. I will see you later.
See you later.